Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Lisa Levinson, the campaigns director with In Defense of Animals and the founder of Vegan Spirituality and the co-founder of the Interfaith Vegan Coalition. I am really thrilled to bring our program to you today. We are having a special guest, and what we're doing here together is exploring veganism as a spiritual practice as part of our online vegan spirituality gathering that we do. We also have in-person gatherings, and you can find them by going to Meetup and searching for vegan spirituality. You might find one near you. They're also on Facebook under Vegan Spirituality Community, and we have a website, veganspirituality.com. So we will share all of that with you so you can find a local group, and we're really happy to have you here in this online meeting today. So it's my pleasure to get us started. I'd like to first introduce you to my co-host today. We have a special guest co-host as well, which is Reverend Carol Saunders. Hi, Carol, how are you?
Great. I'm doing great, Lisa. It's good to be with you.
So glad you're here. And will you do us the honors of introducing our special guest speaker today?
Whoops. Yes, I will. My mic just dropped. Sorry. Mic drop. Okay. Today, our guest is Sarina Farb, and she's a holistic vegan educator, coach, and TEDx speaker, working to make the world a better place for all beings. She's a co-founder and producer of the inaugural Thrive Alive Vegan Fest and focuses on combining heart and science to empower people to live happy, healthy, and compassionate lives. Sarina was also born and raised in Kansas and has given hundreds of lectures around the country, while her videos and content have reached more than 1 million people. That's pretty awesome. Hi, Sarina.
Hi, Carol. Thank you so much. And I'm honored to be here.
It's great. It's an honor for me too. I'm sad that Judy couldn't make it, but I'm glad to be pinch hitting for her. Um, let's just dig in. Usually on this show, Vegan Spirituality, we ask the guests, how did they go vegan and what inspired them to go vegan? But you were born into a vegan family, which is just really, really unique. And I guess the question would be, what inspired you to stay vegan? And I think I'm going to have a follow-up question about what it was like to be born vegan, to grow up vegan.
Thank you. Yeah. Um, what inspired me to stay vegan is fundamentally the animals, but it's all the reasons. It's because, and I think this is also kind of, we'll say, fundamental to my spirituality. I think it's very telling that the way of living and lifestyle that is healthiest for us and best for the planet, doesn't hurt animals. Or put another way, the way of living that doesn't unnecessarily harm animals happens to be the healthiest and most sustainable way for us to live. Um, and I would never, fundamentally, it comes down to if we can live happy and healthy lives without hurting others, then why do so? And that is why I have absolutely stayed vegan.
I think it's something that we can all identify with. So thank you for articulating that. But I keep thinking about being born vegan and being a child vegan. And I think about things like, I raised 3 daughters and I didn't raise them vegan because I wasn't vegan at the time. But I mean, there's like birthday parties and Halloween candy and, all these things that you would have to kind of not participating. I'm just really interested in what challenges you had growing up as a vegan with friends who were probably not vegan when you were a child.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a very unique experience. And I mentioned like you when you introduced me that I was born and raised vegan in Kansas. Most people, when they hear that I was born and raised vegan, they assume like California or New York. Which definitely wasn't the case. It was here in Kansas where I also currently live. And um it was a very unique experience to say the least. Um, in many ways, I think it taught me a lot about conformity or the opposite of conformity, how to be different, how to think for myself, how to be okay living a life and making choices that I don't see reflected in the people around me from my very earliest ages. And along with that, I think it taught me a lot of skills about communication and compassion because, I think a lot of people, um, when they go vegan, we talk about sort of the angry vegan period that I think a lot of people experience. Oh, I learned this information, if I just can tell everyone else this information, surely they'll get it too. And then when they don't, people are frustrated and upset. And, I think it's a very common thing that a lot of vegans and animal advocates deal with. And I think sometimes when we're in that phase or people deal with that, maybe we don't always communicate as kindly, effectively, compassionately as we would like. And I think for me, growing up from day one, seeing something that I feel strongly is an injustice. And then I turn and I look and I see my friends and my peers and other good, caring people participating in that. I think for me, what was different is I've always been in that. There was never this like, oh, I understand where they're coming from because I used to be there too, and now I've changed. And so in many ways that was very hard. That's, when people ask me what's the hardest thing about growing up vegan, it wasn't actually the birthday parties or the not getting to eat the same cake or ice cream or whatever. It was I see something that's an injustice. I don't want to eat animals. I don't want to hurt animals. And then looking at my friends and saying, well, don't they love animals? Like, why are they eating them? But at the same time, I feel like it taught me immense compassion and understanding in the long run because that's been my whole life. And I still have been friends with, built, relationships and maintained connections with people who are actively participating in something that I view as violence and an injustice. Um, so I think the mental and social aspect in that way were really, the more difficult part, but also they taught me so much and they taught me to be okay standing out, being different, being proud of being different. Which I was a very strange child, not strange, yeah, unique. We'll say I didn't really care about fitting in, and I think, some children growing up vegan maybe do, but I was very proud of being different. I I used to eat, and this was back at a time where I feel like even when it comes to culture, we're much more embracing of different cultural backgrounds now. And I feel like when I was, in like fourth, fifth, sixth grade, no one else was eating even sushi in their school lunch. And I would take like veggie rolls of sushi or tofu sandwiches, which just seemed so foreign to like the kids around me. And I remember like I thought it was the funniest thing to take sheets of nori seaweed and just eat them plain and then tell everyone I was eating green paper. I just thought, that was cool to be like, look, I'm eating paper. And none of them had seen seaweed or sushi. They didn't know what it was. And they were just like, what's that?
Kansas.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I think you really raise a good point because I know one of the ways I can empathize with people who are are not aligned with my own values and not acting them out and not eating what we would consider compassionately. I can go back to, oh, I was that way once too. I can go back to that, and you can't, and that's really, really interesting. I had not really thought about but what that would be like. So, interesting. I am curious, you were raised vegan, so you were raised with parents teaching you these values. But do you feel like you had an innate sense of compassion for the animals, or do you feel like it was really taught to you really early, and so it's hard to kind of discern the difference?
I absolutely think I had an innate sense of compassion. I think everyone does. I think it's something that we are absolutely born with. And what I tell people, because lots of people have accused my parents of brainwashing me, of me being brainwashed. And I think it's the opposite. I think we are all born with an innate sense of compassion that if children realized what animals, being turned into food was, what the food, their chicken nuggets, these things they're, eating were, I think they would never want to eat them. And we have a society that we live in, and parents that in many cases don't know better, that are then brainwashing their children and society as a whole to disassociate and disconnect from our innate compassion and be okay with eating animal body parts and these things. That children are very compassionate. If they saw or knew what they were really doing, they would never want to. And so I say, all my parents did was tell me the truth. They told me the truth about our food system, and they told me the truth that we don't need to eat animals or animal products to live happy and healthy lives.
Yeah. And that's just so beautiful. And I think it just gives so much hope to parents that are trying to raise their child vegan or want to raise their child vegan or people your age who have the dream of raising their child vegan. That you're not, I mean, we of course know that we're not brainwashing. We know that. But I can see how society would say that. And really you're just being set free to live out your innate compassion and your innate love. And I just really love that. It's so beautiful. So we'll switch to a little bit different topic. You've given hundreds of live talks around the country, and you've created a lot of vegan videos. How do you combine heart and science in your teachings, and what kind of responses do you receive?
Yeah. So for me, combining heart and science really comes down to a nuanced approach to things. I like my background's in science. I love evidence. I love studies. I love data. Um, and yet I also recognize that when it comes to effective communication, advocacy, compelling, narratives, the data and the numbers don't reach people the way that we would often like. And a simple example is when we look at the number of animals that are raised and killed for food every year. When we talk about, fishes pulled from the sea, we're talking billions of land animals, trillions of, sea animals and altogether. Our human brain can't really comprehend and isn't built to comprehend that. So when you're trying to express the magnitude or horror of what's going on, and we say, there's 70, 100 billion land animals that are killed every year, people just kind of give you a blank look. But when you say, let me tell you the story of this individual cow that was born on a dairy farm and had, their baby taken from them, or jumped off the back of a truck and broke their leg, or we connect with individuals. And so I think that's when I combine heart and science, it's about nuance. It's about recognizing that communication, that the world is not black and white, that there's nuance and there's gray areas. And if we can, use data and bring evidence into heart-centered, heartfelt, and compassionate stories, messaging, individualized approaches that are, kind of tailored and recognize the humanity in whoever and the individuals that we're talking to as well. That it's not one or the other. It's not like just a pure emotional appeal and not just a pure throwing data at someone. That I like to combine both of that to, create this holistic approach.
I mean, it's a really good idea. I do get that throwing numbers at people are just overwhelmed by data, statistics, quotes and all that kind of stuff. It's like it becomes this too hard to comprehend. I know when I use numbers, I try to bring them down to something that, like that's 5 Chicagos or something like that, so that people can kind of get it. But even that, you're bringing it down to the individual and appealing to the heart is a really, really good idea in your advocacy. Can you just share really quickly what your science background is?
Yeah, I got my degree in biochemistry and policy studies, and I grew up actually sort of competing in science fairs and biotechnology competitions, and I spent 2 years working in a research lab in high school before I ever got to college. So, done a lot of cell biology bench work and growing breast cancer cells and stuff like that.
Okay, and you never had to deal with animal testing or anything like that in your labs?
Not live animal testing, but that is part of the reason that I am not still in that field. a lot of people don't realize how I specifically chose cell biology because that's you're working with cell lines grown, in culture and not like whole animals or in vivo experimentation. But the further I got along in that, the more I realized that the type of stuff that I was interested in doing and what's just immersed in that field, the cells are grown for the most part in fetal bovine serum. And if you want to stain cells and look at them under the microscope or determine something, you're using antibodies that were grown and injected in animals. Or there's just so many animal products, even when it's not live animals. And I actually worked in a non-animal contract testing lab. So they were doing the research for like a lot of the companies that have the leaping bunny or, sort of no animal testing stamps on them. And yet most people don't realize that labs like that, they had like donated cow eyeballs from slaughterhouses that we were doing tests on. And so there was no animal testing as in live animals, but there's still animal products in so much biotechnology and biochemistry and cell biology. And there's many reasons I didn't continue directly down that path towards, research or getting my PhD, but the ethics and animal products were one of the reasons.
I think that you just shed light on something that a lot of people don't know. And I think that's just really, really helpful. Even if you're trying to do the no animal testing, that doesn't mean that it's free of animal
Yep,
being tested on in some way. Yeah. It's really interesting to know from a spiritual standpoint too. It's like the energy of that, and whatever products or whatever it is that you're working on, the energy of that's kind of tainted with that, the suffering and the sadness. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's really important. So let's now shift to your Thrive Alive Vegan Fest, which is so fun. Tell us about what's going to be happening there. Just tell us about that whole event.
Yeah. So I have attended many vegan conferences, festivals, retreats. I grew up attending one that is to this day one of my favorites and incredibly meaningful to me, and that's Vegan Summerfest in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And especially growing up vegan in Kansas and then going there with my family once a year, this was one of the few places that I got to meet other vegans in real life. There was a kids center, so I met other vegan children that were my age. I had some mentors that were a couple years older than me, that many of them are still like lifelong best friends to this day. And then it was also this place where I could go and I didn't have to ask questions, and I sort of could be normal once a year for 5 days and know that I could eat anything that they served there. So for so many reasons, having that experience when I was a child was incredibly meaningful. And there's so many things about that I really liked. And then sort of since then as an adult, I've also attended the Woodstock Fruit Festival. I attended like an agorist anarchist festival that I spoke at in Mexico, and music festivals, like all kinds of different, health conferences, vegan conferences, the animal rights conference, to like retreats and music festivals. And for the last 6 or 7 years, every time I've gone to one of these and seen or felt, elements of it that are incredibly powerful or moving, I've had the thought of like, well, if I was organizing a conference or festival, this is what I would do. And so I've like kind of been collecting all of my favorite elements from all these different experiences. And for a number of years now, I've had this vision of like this ideal, the festival that I would want to attend, the dream experience that I would want to have. And so it was actually at the last Woodstock Fruit Festival, I met my friend Erin, and I kind of shared my vision with her, and we started talking. And she's also a longtime vegan, but she brings another element. She runs sober parties in Miami. And so she's deeply and equally passionate about this idea of getting high on life. Like we don't need substances to have fun. And she's been to lots of music festivals events. And one of the, things she's wanted to see is more substance-free events. And so we've kind of joined forces to create our joint dream festival, which best I can describe it, if you imagine, a health and wellness retreat where you're served food and you have meditation and exercise classes and cooking demos and vegan speakers and workshops. So you've got all of that. And then in the evening, you have like stages with live musicians that all are vegan, performing everything from reggae to rap to hip hop, like music festival kind of vibe. And then also add into that adult summer camp. So, meaning lots of music festivals are often very big and overwhelming, and you just go with your friends. One of the number one things both of us want to create with this is a community. Like, we want to create a family where people who don't know any other vegans in real life or, want to go to something by themselves, they can go and you're not going to be anonymous. You're not going to get lost in a crowd. You're going to walk away with new best friends and, we're going to have deep, authentic connection. So it's got that summer camp vibe where people, because they're going to be on site, staying together, eating communal meals together, and then playing summer camp games and swimming and hiking and playing, capture the flag type of things. So it's like, yeah, all in one, really, all of our favorite elements. It's vegan educational wellness retreat with music festival and adult vegan summer camp. And not just adult, family friendly. We are also going to have a kids program and potential childcare on site. So we'll have like specific vegan kids activities, and then parents can leave their kids somewhere a couple hours out of the day so that they can attend the workshops and speeches and then of course it's all substance free, so there'll be no alcohol or drugs, and the idea is to be present in the moment, authentically connecting with one another and eating delicious. We won't have vendors or food trucks. The food is actually going to be like cooked by volunteers on site and then all served in a camp style dining hall, so it'll be like summer camp vibes. You come in and we're all
you got the cooking
together.
shift.
Yes.
I remember camp. You have the cooking shift, the cleanup shift, the bathroom shift.
Paying attendees will not have that. We have like a work trade program for people that want to work those shifts. So
Okay. Okay. Do you see taking this on the road, or are you seeing it being in Kansas like every year?
Well, we did want to do something more in the Midwest because the coasts do get the majority of the large vegan events. We are not wedded to Kansas, but we searched for months for a venue that had all the different things that we wanted. And we ended up finding one just outside of Kansas City, which is convenient for me because I live here. My business partner, Erin, lives in Miami, so she's coming up in a week or two to so we can work together and do stuff at the venue. But it's a great venue. We are not wedded. We're going to see how this first year goes.
Yeah, I hold my retreat in the Kansas City area too, and I love the idea of having the energy of this taking care of the planet and taking care of the animals and awakening in consciousness and rising to Homo Himsa and all that. I love having that energy in the Midwest. I think it really, really shifts things. So I love that you're there, and taking it on the road would be great too. But it's really fun for the Midwest to get that energy, and it's good for the Midwest.
Yes.
Um, all right. So next question is, one of the goals at Vegan Spirituality is to link our spiritual path to our passion to help the animals. As we all know, it's very traumatic to witness what humans do and to animals in our world. It looks like Thrive Alive will have an emphasis on fun, music, self-care, as well as education. I think you already did this. Please tell me more about your vision for the fest. Is there anything more you want to talk about Vegan Fest? And I mean, as a retreat planner myself, I'm really curious. I got tons of questions for you we can handle offline, because it's kind of like if you build, they will come thing. It's like you just don't
Yes.
know. There's a lot of kind of tension, and are people going to come? I've created this idea, and so I know that must be what it's kind of like for you as well. And you've probably got to have a lot of people there to sustain all the activities that you're going to be doing.
Yes, our goal, 400 will be sold out. That's the max that we have decided we can accommodate, this first year and at this time with the venue and everything. But yeah, that's a lot of people. And definitely, I'm not a gambler, and this feels like one of the biggest gambles I've ever taken. So
Yeah.
it's a steep learning curve and a lot of realizing that yeah, people really buy tickets last minute, and it's making me question a lot of my own habits, because I'm expecting people to buy tickets 7, 8 months out, and I'm like, when have I ever bought a ticket for anything
I
7 or 8 months
I
out?
know, I know. I look at my retreats in October. I'm like, okay, am I going to have the retreat every year? It's this way. It's like, it's going to happen. Is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? It always happens because in the last month people come through. But prior to that, it's like you got all this stuff set up. So, and this is the first time too. The inaugural one is the one.
Yeah.
You're like, it's a test. And I just hope you enjoy the whole test part of it, because you can't predict that much. You'll try to predict, but you got to kind of let it go and let spirit kind of take it.
It's been
So
it's like there were days where I was like, what did I do? Oh no, and then right now I'm in a pretty good place that we're building momentum, and I'm like, yeah, it's all gonna work out, but that's because you're asking me today.
yeah, right, right. Well, a lot of it is trust, and that's really part of the spiritual path. And speaking of spiritual, is there a spiritual component to your fest?
Yes, absolutely. In terms of the education and topics, we're also taking a very holistic approach. So we will have keynote speakers that are covering, health and ethics and sustainability, and as well as healing themselves from food and food addictions, as well as substances and recovery. So we kind of have, and some of our speakers cover that both. One of our keynote speakers is Adam Sudd, for those who may be aware, who has this incredibly, empowering, amazing, transformative story of, getting off drugs and addiction to food and losing like a couple 100 pounds, I believe, on a plant-based diet. And so it's kind of all, wrapped into one on his health journey. But for many people, when it comes to recovery of any kind of addiction, spirituality is often a big piece of that. And we have a couple speakers who may explicitly be talking about, that in their personal journeys. We're also going to have, meditation workshops, cacao ceremonies, sound healing. So it's, again, bringing in some of the elements from other music festivals, but then also that vegan education. And the scheduling is still to be determined. We're still very much in the process of building our workshop schedule. But we are hoping to actually have some of our workshop presenters or speakers talking about things like, the connection between Christianity and the history of Jesus, kind of Christspiracy type of topics. We want to have people speaking and leading workshops about that. And then we also have actually 2 different yoga teachers who are likely going to give workshops on, the connection between yoga and veganism from the philosophy and spirituality standpoint, and how they go together and are connected. So we'll be bringing it in so many different ways, and taking this very holistic approach with our information of mind, body, and soul wellness, kind of, and that, along with community. Like, community is such a spiritual, powerful thing too. And I'll just add, like, that's one of the things that's been most powerful for me at many of the other events I've been to. It's one thing to go on YouTube and listen to some speaker telling, their story about, healing their, illness or whatever on a plant-based diet, or talking about animals and compassion. And it's another thing to sit in a room with 400 other people and a real person on stage, and that collective energy of everyone sighing or going, oh, like reacting together. And if anyone is listening who hasn't experienced this, like, there is literally no comparison. The real in-person collective experience, even singing together. We have some musicians that are going to be singing, like, animal rights themed songs and things about liberation for all beings and just again, there's nothing in my mind as powerful as that collective energy and that in-person like experiencing that all together that I think leads to dramatic motivation, habit change, behavior change. Like it is so much more inspiring and motivating than any video or documentary or anything can
Completely
be.
agree. I could this because there's a physical energy that you're feeling. You feel it. And it's really hard
Absolutely.
to feel it with a screen. It really is. It's a whole different thing. So, yay for you. Good job. So tell us how people can find out about it. And do you have a website or anything like that where people can learn more about it?
Yes, thrivealivefest.com is the website, and that has our full lineup, which we're still adding workshop presenters to currently. And you can see like all the different things you can expect and what's included in your ticket and the different housing options because we do have ranges of housing. This is one of the things we wanted in a venue. We wanted a venue that allowed tent camping so we can offer a really cheap, really affordable housing option. And then for people that, want their comforts and air conditioning and private bathrooms, we also have rooms on site for that. So all those different housing options and accommodation options are available there. And then we also are on Instagram and Facebook under Thrive Alive Fest.
Wonderful. Great. Do you have anything else you want to add before we go into the question and answer?
I hope to see everyone there. I'm like genuinely so excited about what we're creating and haven't seen anything quite like this. And it's, I'm a little bit sad because I'm creating it for other people, really, because I do recognize as the co-organizer, I'm probably going to be a little bit more stressed and not able to just sort of
Yeah, that's for sure.
freely have
You won't
fun.
be you'll be immersed in a different way. You're going to be your attention's going to be on everybody and how's it all going and all that kind of thing. But I'm sure it sounds like you have help and you've got a good partner that you're working with, and
Mhm.
you'll have to figure out a way to kind of pull yourself away from that part of it and enjoy the event yourself. So yeah.
Yes, yes, but it's this is the event that, I would pay just to go to attend if it existed because I'm creating what I want to attend.
I understand. I started a church because I thought every church I went to, I would do it differently. I would do that. I would do. So I started a church. That's pretty dramatic. So I get completely where you're coming from. This is the event. This is Sarina's dream event, and it's going to be wonderful. So Lisa, I don't know who else is out there who can start the Q&A. Are you still there?
Yes, definitely. Wow. I am so excited about the Thrive Alive Vegan Festival. This is an amazing production that you're part of and helped inspire and are co-producing, Sarina. This is really amazing. I hope to join in the fun too. And so we're thrilled. And I'm actually very excited that Reverend Carol, that you've been doing this interview because you and Sarina have so much in common with regards to putting together these retreats and these events, even in the same area. So you might be able to help one another to build these
Yeah.
both of these events.
Yeah, I've
So
got
that's
lots of,
that's really
it's unsolicited. If she asks for advice, I'll let her, I'll
Oh,
give her
you
my
can
advice, but not until
give
she
it.
asks.
Oh, I'll take it. I want your advice.
yes, definitely. There are some simple questions, but one might be like where to get tickets. Are those on the website? Is there like an easy way for people to do that?
Yes, thrivealivefest.com, and it has a link to the ticket platform and all the tickets, which, oh, I will add, we do have prices going up on June 1st. So now is a fantastic time to buy if you want to save money.
Excellent, excellent. And we have a couple of questions here, and these are kind of interesting going back into your vegan story. And one is from CJ, who asks, why were your parents vegan? And then did they have any issues with authority figures because they were raising vegan kids back in the day?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my mom went vegan in the early 1990s while she was working a job for a pharmaceutical company. And part of her job took her to tour animal testing labs, chicken hatcheries, and pig farms in the Midwest. She wasn't working in these facilities, like as an employee. She was kind of a sales specialist, but would go to them to sell them her products from her company. And she'd been a lifelong animal lover, and there's a longer version of her story that she tells herself. Um, but yeah, she'd been a lifelong animal lover, and then it was really seeing the inside of a chicken hatchery and learning about the egg industry. And it's what she saw firsthand that made her say she wanted to raise children that she knew she wanted children at this point. She'd always wanted kids, but she said, "What can I do to raise children that will never turn a blind eye to injustice, that will never see something in front of them and look away?" And so that led her to go vegan and want to raise us vegan, and not just on a plant-based diet, right? But teaching us about the why and having it be this ethical principle of, when we see injustice in front of us, we have a duty to speak out against it and not participate in it, regardless of how normalized, controversial, unpopular, like it shouldn't matter. So that tells you something about my mom. She and she did that in Kansas. And when she went vegan, she'd never met another vegan in real life, much less dated one. And she met my dad and basically said she was also the one that owned the house, so he was going to be moving in with her. And she was like, "Great, if we're going to get married and have kids, you have to agree to keep the house vegan and raise them vegan and set the example in front of them." And my dad was like, "Okay, I can do that. You're cooking, like, whatever." And then by the time I was like 6 months old, I think he was also vegan. Because for a little while before she quit her job, she was coming home crying and telling him stories of what she was seeing. And then she started taking him to, animal rights events and vegan conferences, and he learned a lot at those. But she's really the activist, and yes, she has an issue with authority. um, I say that jokingly, but she's a very strong, uh, strong-willed person. I think, just being able to go vegan when you don't know any other vegans in real life, and then choosing to raise your children vegan when you've never known or seen, anyone else doing that, takes a very strong kind of person, I think. Um, but she did her research. And we would be in doctors' offices, and they would be, because I did competitive gymnastics as a kid, and they would be saying, "You don't drink cow's milk? Like, how can you be doing gymnastics? You have weak bones." And then she'd say, like, "Oh, here's all the stack of peer-reviewed research papers about dairy. Have you ever looked at these?" Um, and definitely challenged authority figures around veganism quite frequently. She would come to bat for me if I had issues with teachers or other kids or schools. And she's not so much now, but she was a big activist for many, many years. And so I grew up, not just being vegan, but going to activism, doing tabling, leafleting, food giveaways, all kinds of different outreach with her.
Wow. So you got to grow up with all of this. That's very unusual for most of us. And also, I think if I remember correctly, your mom wrote a book about raising vegan kids. Is that right?
Yes, she did. It's called Compassionate Souls: Raising the Next Generation to Change the World. And it's out of print long time ago, but you can find some copies of it online, I think.
Fantastic. So a real expert. And that was a great question that we had. There is another question too, which is about if you would be able to talk, this is from Jana, about the choice between being vegan and being vegetarian. And specifically, how does a vegetarian harm animals if they only eat eggs and dairy and honey from sources where animals are taken well care of? And a related question might be, what do you see the role or place of animals commonly raised and killed for human food if everyone eats a vegan diet?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, fundamentally it comes down to this idea of, can we live happy and healthy lives without hurting animals? And while at face value, things like eggs and dairy and honey seem like, oh, well, chickens lay eggs anyway, we can just pick them up. How does that hurt them? Or honey, like there's excess, and same with, cow's milk. But the reality is quite different than that. In the egg industry, a lot of people don't realize that, and this is true, I'll say, regardless of whether your eggs are backyard eggs or free range or humanely raised, anybody that is buying chicks to have backyard chicks at a feed store or mail ordering them online, they're coming from commercial chicken hatcheries where male chicks are considered useless and are literally ground up alive on their first day of life, half of all the chicks born. So, and I've been to lots of, I live in Kansas, I've been to lots of local backyard free range, these better farms, and I've asked and said, like, oh, so where did you get your chicks? And usually it's the feed store, which means they're supporting the chicken hatcheries. And then, of course, I think the bigger issue too is this idea of exploitation. When we talk about honey or dairy or eggs, and I can go into the dairy industry as well. It's a brutal industry where we forcibly impregnate cows to keep them pregnant, because only pregnant mothers produce, pregnant or just had a baby mothers produce enough milk to be profitable. And the industry's all about profit. So we forcibly impregnate mother cows, and then as soon as they have their baby, we take their baby away so that we can take the milk, and then we repeat that cycle over and over until their bodies give out. And then we also kill them for meat. So the dairy industry is the beef industry. But even with something like honey, which doesn't seem, obviously as bad to a lot of people, the bigger question is this idea of use. And I think there is an inherent problem when we are looking at other animals and other beings as objects for us to use and exploit. And when we do that, right? When we say like, oh, well, if it doesn't hurt them and I have a chicken in my backyard and I can take their eggs, then we create this slippery slope where it's like, maybe in this perfect ideal scenario, that's how it works. But then what if we develop a taste for eggs and we say, well, we're not getting enough eggs. Now I'm used to baking with eggs or cooking with eggs. So we get another chicken. And then, we're breeding them, or they stop producing eggs. And since we got them for eggs, well, now we have to feed them and take care of them, which if you're rescuing them and truly just giving them a home for their benefit, then you're prepared for and ready to take care of them. But if you're thinking, what am I going to get from them? Then as soon as they're not producing eggs, they become this extra expense or mouth to feed. And I've seen this happen firsthand with local farms here in Kansas, people I know, where they were vegetarian. They started off, they said, let's have a few backyard eggs. And then they ended up with some male chickens that didn't produce eggs. And one they could, afford and take care of. And then their chickens didn't lay enough eggs. So they got another. And then it was, oh, well, now we've got too many males, or, oh, now we have too many females that aren't producing eggs anymore. And they went from, we're going to find good homes for every chicken that we can't take care of, to, well, that's just too much effort. So we'll just give them away to people. We don't know what happens to them, to then actually killing them and eating them themselves and no longer being vegetarian, because they realized that the system of exploiting animals, for just eggs or just dairy wasn't profitable. And so I think we have to fundamentally shift our mindset around animals away from viewing them as other objects, because as long as we view them as commodities or objects that we can own, sell, use, and exploit, then their interests are never going to be respected. Because if there's ever a competition, or if it ever comes between what we want and what they want, because we can own them, use them, and sell them, our interests are always going to come first, and their true, want for life and connection and their babies and families, which they all have, will never be fully respected. So I think it's less about trying to find, this ideal system or way that we can still do the wrong thing, and more about completely transforming our relationship with animals into one where they are not viewed as objects. And along with that, you know, most of the animals that we talk about and that people are concerned about, I've heard it many times, oh, well, then wouldn't the cows go extinct, or, whatever. It's like everything, including everyone, cats, dogs, domesticated cows, these are all domesticated animals that we have created and bred into existence that are completely dependent on us. That is not fundamentally a healthy, sustainable, compassionate relationship. And so I think the key comes down to, not breeding animals into existence that we've genetically manipulated and bred for our uses. It's transforming how we view them, and then living in harmony with the free living wild animals that deserve the right to, safe land, peace, space, and happiness like we do.
Well, Sarina, you are certainly getting accolades in the chat. We've got standing ovation, seriously good explanation. So, and Sarina is a professional speaker. She does this topic often. So we are very grateful to you for being here today. We also have one other question, I think, which is, how do you feel about the growing analog industry?
I'm going to assume we're talking about like plant-based meats.
That's what I'm assuming as well.
Okay. This is where I address things with nuance, right? So I think both, well, from an ethical perspective, they're great. If you're not eating animals, and no one's dying for you to eat what you want, they're fantastic. From a health perspective, I think it comes down to what we're comparing them to, right? So if you are eating the standard American diet, or you're someone that eats at Burger King already all the time, then, an Impossible Whopper, swapping out, a beef burger for an Impossible Whopper, I think you're going to get a benefit because you're not having the animal protein and the, and the no cholesterol, but there's still going to be saturated fat and salt. And, so if you are trying to optimize your diet and health as someone eating plant-based, then probably don't eat at Burger King, one way or the other. Like, that's not going to be a way to optimize your health. And so, I think when it comes to analog meats and the conversation around health, there's so much stuff that gets thrown around and kind of mixed up, and there's so much nuance, but it's all about what you're comparing it to. So animal products have their own set of health issues, which are the animal protein and the cholesterol in particular, the plant foods don't have. But that doesn't make everything that's vegan automatically healthy either. Like, we know fried food and processed foods that are just tons of added sugar and oil and salt, not healthy, whether it's animal-based or plant-based. So there's, stages we can, grow to. And I personally try to minimize my highly processed vegan product consumption and eat mostly whole foods, particularly at home. But I will eat other things when I am out or at a vegan restaurant on occasion. But I will say, if I'm at a non-vegan restaurant that I don't know and don't trust, I'm very skeptical about eating the analog products because they just kind of sketch me out. If it's an all vegan restaurant, I can, that's fine. But if it's somebody that does both, I'm probably not going to do too much on that, because I'd be afraid that they accidentally got something wrong.
Well, thank you for your honesty about that. And that was exactly the question that Trish actually asked us. So thank you. And one other question, and then I think we'll move towards our closing, which is, Sarina, where is your book, and where can folks buy it? Have you written a special book? Is there something we want to tell everybody?
I have not written a book yet. It is on my future vision to-do list. I think the closest thing, I have lots of YouTube videos. Also, if you go to my personal website, which is bornvegan.org, I do have like um, a, I think it's linked on there right now, a vibrant vegan starter guide that's not even starter guide. It's more of like my holistic approach of like how to help people truly feel empowered and thrive as a vegan. It's a short, free e-booklet basically. So
The question was a little bit sarcastic because I was like, you talked about your mother writing a book, and I was like,
oh,
oh, that sounds amazing. She sounds amazing. And then you spoke so eloquently, and I was just like, where's her book? I want to read that.
it's on my to-do list. It
Yeah.
is.
I'm here for it. Let us know. I thank you so much for speaking today, Sarina. I really relate to everything you're saying. You're very eloquent. Um, I don't know if we have a little bit of time. I'm curious what your opinion is on cultured meat. Can
That
we
was
talk about
why,
that?
yes, that was why I clarified because I do think they are two very different situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not as big of a fan of cultured meat. It's not something that I personally have any interest in eating or think I would ever try. Um, and this is something that I have made some controversial content about in the past, because a lot of people don't realize it. And I will say the science and technology are changing pretty rapidly too. And it's been a couple years since I've like really spent time diving into that. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how much has changed in the last year or two.
Mm-hmm.
But when just, I'd say 2 or 3 years ago, when I was really kind of spending more time in that space, they're the same issues that I talked about when I was growing, say, breast cancer cells in a lab and we used fetal bovine serum. A lot of these cell cultured technologies and products at the time were still heavily dependent on fetal bovine serum in particular as a
Mm-hmm.
medium, which for those that don't know, it's a very brutal process. It's basically they stick a needle into a cow fetus and a pregnant mother at the slaughterhouse and like drain their blood.
Yeah.
It's horrific, it's painful, it's gruesome, it's
And then it's
terrible.
like a core important ingredient for like a lot of this kind of work, right? Like
Yes,
my engineering background was in civil engineering, nowhere near the bio stuff. So I'm learning from you.
yeah. So it's a very standard cell culture. It has supposedly somehow we decided it has the perfect combination of, growth medium and amino acids and all this different stuff. So I know there are efforts to make either plant-based and or synthetic versions of it.
Yeah.
And so that's where like lots of companies at the time and scientists were saying, oh, don't worry, we don't plan to use fetal bovine serum long term. But then at the same time, they were patenting what they were doing. They were creating proprietary stuff. And at the time that I saw it last looked, nobody had published any peer-reviewed study that showed an actual alternative that didn't use, and a lot of the alternatives then were using albumin and some egg products. So even though they weren't fetal bovine serum, they were still other animal products.
Mm-hmm.
So you had this issue where there was a lack of transparency,
Mm.
claims of kind of just believe us, we're going to fix this problem. But then if you said, okay, so what are you actually using instead? There was kind of
Mm.
proprietary, we can't, it was just trust us, we're, which that's not really my
Okay.
personality. I want I want to know the details.
You're your mother's daughter. We're not going to trust that. No. Love it.
Yeah, and not with
Completely agree.
my experience. So there's some issues with that. There's some issues with how the cells are actually gotten to. There's
Mm.
kind of two options. One is a genetic modification model where we're taking an existing cell line and making it immortal, so we don't ever have to get cells from live animals again, and it just replicates indefinitely in culture. The problem with that is that's kind of the same thing as cancer cells in culture that replicate
I know.
indefinitely. The flip side, the other alternative was like constantly getting stem cells from live animals, which they claimed, oh, it's a painless biopsy. We just take a chunk of their flesh. But then you have that same issue of we're still looking at them as something, an object for us to use and exploit. So fundamentally, I think the biggest problem I have is that while plant-based meats actively work against the system of animal exploitation, they support the idea that we can be happy and healthy living off of plants and that we don't need actual animal flesh and protein. Lab-based, cell-cultured animal products don't do that. They uphold the exact system that I want to dismantle by saying animal protein is healthy, animal flesh is something to eat, animals are ours to take cells from or things from and use. So yes, I am not the biggest fan.
Really well spoken. So great to hear,
Thank you so much,
a new view
Sarina.
about that. Thank you so much, Sarina.
And we have also Rajay, who's here. He mentions as a techie that his view on cultured meats is that they always overpromise and underdeliver, and when they inevitably fall short of their goal, they aim for 50% cultured meat in the products. These are some concerns, additional ones.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much more about the sustainability. And I've written, I'll say, for anybody who's interested, multiple articles and made multiple videos, panel discussions and debates on the topic. So it's out there for people that want to dive deeper into that.
Love it.
Thank you so much. We did put your website in there, and I think people can find you on YouTube as, would it be under Born Vegan?
Born Vegan, yes.
Born Vegan, wonderful, on YouTube. So thank you, Sarina, so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. We're so excited about the Thrive Alive Festival, and for Carol for doing this wonderful interview, and Mary for your help with all of the chatting. And we are at our closing, so we'd love to, Sarina, if you do us the honor of sharing either a special reading or something to close us out tonight.
Yeah, I'll share one of my favorite sort of prayers that has always kind of guided me is the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sarina. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. We hope that we'll see you again on another vegan spirituality program. And we hope that you enjoy your evening, and thank you for being compassionate vegan souls and choosing this lifestyle. So we're very grateful to all of you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
See you at Thrive Alive.